Come, take a closer walk with me.
Let me explain the rules.
Rules?
Yeah, you left in such a rush, I didn't get a chance to explain.
2 extra fingers freaked me out a little bit.
I just figured I'd get your attention. I did the same thing to Gandhi. He didn't eat for 3 weeks. Anyway, here's the deal. You have all my powers. Use them any way you choose. There are only 2 rules. You can't tell anybody you're God. Believe me, you don't want that kind of attention. And you can't mess with free will.
Uh-huh. Can I ask why?
Yes, you can. That's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty of free will. We all have the option to question with it. And so why do I bring that up? Why is free will relevant to the material that we have been reading in the first 3 chapters, and now we're on to the 4th chapter of the book of Genesis? How might that be relevant to our conversation? Do we see examples in the first 4 chapters of free will? You feel free to unmute yourself.
Well, I would like to say that based upon the understanding of Adam and the 2 creations, that there's something to be said about free will from the very beginning in terms of choices that Adam made. And I'm looking at a book by John C. Maxwell, who quotes David Brooks and saying that as we look at the creation story, we should also think about Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 wants to build and create and produce and discover things. He wants to have a high status and win victories. But Adam 2, in the second creation story, is the internal Adam. Adam 2 wants to embody certain moral qualities. Adam 2 wants to have an inner character, a sense of wellness. Adam 2 wants a solid sense of knowing right from wrong and doing good and being good, wants to love intimately, to sacrifice self in service for others, to live in obedience to some transcendent truth, and to have a cohesive manner of inner soul and knowing and honoring creation and one's own possibilities. But we have the Adam 1 and the Adam 2 in each of us.
How is that landing with somebody, with you all out there? In terms of, we have, as Dr. Shannon Strong mentions, we have 2 accounts of creation, right? And as we've studied in the text, that there are, one is a very orderly account. The first one is very orderly, where things are done in sort of sequential order, and the culmination of creation is of creation, big C, is the creation of humanity, male and female together. And then in the second one, we have Adam is created, Adam, the male figure, is created before all of the animals, and then ultimately Eve. And then I think that if we look at chapter 3 as an extension of the second creation story, and that's where we have the account with the serpent. And as we discussed last week, the instructions God gave about not eating from the forbidden tree, Eve was not present when was done, and so we don't know what knowledge that she had, but we certainly know that Adam was in possession of that knowledge, and yet he disobeys God, for lack of a better word, and eats of that tree. So that's an example of him exercising free will, right? And we'll come back to that a little more. But one of the things, before we sort of shift over to the story of Cain and Abel, and I'm trying to pull up my the Bible here, and I think hopefully I can always do a hard copy, but I'd like us to sort of have the text in front of us if we can. One of the things that I'd like us to think about, and we talked about this last week, is the both creation stories have a theme of relationship, right? Relationship with God, relationship to ourselves, a relationship to others in humanity, right? Sociology, as well as a relationship to the whole of creation. Whether, we're not going to debate whether it's dominion or stewardship and those principles, but we have that there. And so I know that there's some of us on this call who are parents or grandparents or are charged with providing some sort of guidance to younger people. And so I think it's important for us to think about particularly the second creation story, and the story of the Garden of Eden, where God walks with Adam and Eve and gives them instructions. But we all know, as I know as a father, that at some point in time, my kids are going to do something that I didn't want them to do, and as a matter of fact, I've been a father long enough. They have done things that I have asked them not to do, right? So I think it's helpful for us to think about this anthropomorphic God, right, who is giving lessons to Adam and Eve, and then the context of a parent rearing a child to be able to know the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, but ultimately to be able to live with the consequences of the decisions that they make, right? How is that landing with you guys? Any thoughts on that? Feel free to use the chat. Right? So we ultimately all have some degree of free will. So I'm going to now turn our attention back to the scripture. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So can I get someone to, we're going to read until the end of the 7th verse. Brother Richard Allen Brown, do you mind reading from starting here? Now the man knew his wife, Eve. Okay. Of course, that would
Where's Roscione?
I'm mute.
There we go.
I'm muted. All right, I'll just go ahead and read. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of the Lord. Next, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel for his part brought of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. All right. So what's going on here? What are we hearing? Tell me what you hear. What impressions do we have of God? And the two primary actors in this passage are God and Cain. What are our impressions of the two, of God and Cain?
Cain is being reprimanded?
Okay, reprimanded. In what in passage? Where is he being reprimanded?
Well, he's being reprimanded because of his behavior. That he felt the Lord didn't acknowledge him well, so he felt bad, and then the Lord came back to him.
Okay. Now, he was being reprimanded because of his behavior in response to
The Lord's action.
right.
The Lord's acknowledgement or less than desirable acknowledgement of what he offered.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask a question? This is Mary.
Yep.
Why was his offering unacceptable? Why was Cain's offering unacceptable?
So the text is silent on that. I'm having problems with my Apple. That book keeps crashing on me, so I can't, pull it up. I have other books that we can look for. And so if you have the, your Bible with you, we can go back and look at it, but it doesn't say, right? All we have, we were reading from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which is the hard copy that I have in front of me. And what I'm looking at, and all it says is that, and the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So we had a robust conversation earlier today about what does no regard mean? Does that mean that that God did not like the offering? Or that God was somehow displeased with the offering? It doesn't say. In fact, if you refer to Holy Imagination, someplace around here, the author says that we don't even have any evidence that God requested an offering. That this was something that it appears that this offering may have been of their own volition. Now, in my reading of it and in the time since our conversation earlier today, and sort of, referring to a couple of different versions of the Bible, both the New Revised Standard Version as well as the King James Version. And, I've got 5-6 different versions of the Bible. It seems to be that the commentary consensus is that no regard just means it was like, he wasn't necessarily displeased or overwhelmed, right? I mean, one could imagine, if we want to stick with the parent motif, right? It's Father's Day and it's like, oh, another time, thanks. Or the socks, or it reminds me of the time that, my family, I like to cook. You spend enough time with me, you're going to hear some cooking analogies and whatnot. And one time my family got me a thing to make spaghetti out of zucchini, and I don't think I've ever used it, and probably when I got it, knew that I would never use it, but I was like, well, hey, thanks. At least they're giving me something that is adjacent to an activity that I like, right? But an argument could be that I received that gift with no regard. Doesn't mean I disliked it, but I can't remember what else I got that year. So maybe I had no regard for that either, but maybe there was something that I, did favor a little bit more. Right. So we don't know the answer to that. But what we do know, or what we can read into, the text here, is that Cain felt some type of way, to put it mildly, about how his offering was received vis-a-vis his brother's offering, right? And
sorry.
So
is that helpful, Mary?
yes, it is, because I was reading, I have the Message.
Right.
And it says, God liked Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering didn't get his approval. is how it's stated. But yeah, I didn't know if there was anything, further implied there that I had missed of just, it gives us so little to tell us why wasn't it? I mean, he gave him something from his farm that he had grown. Why wasn't that enough? So
And
I
I
was
just,
just wondering if there's something I was missing.
So,
oh, no. Can I speak or let's see here.
yes, just a second, Dr. Sanchon. I wanted to just make one quick point. So I actually have the Message Bible up, and Chris, thank you for pulling that one up. I like a lot of different versions. I often refer to a number of different versions of the Bible. And the Message is a very, very good paraphrasing, and I use it. But it is a paraphrasing to bring it into sort of modern vernacular, right?
Right.
So when we're kind of parsing we're going deep, right? We're trying to go deeper. It's useful to sort of toggle back and forth. So Chris, if you have the ability to switch from the Message to just any other version, we'll see. Let's see what King James says. So which verse is that? Right. See, but so verse 5, but unto Cain and his offering he had not respect. Right. Right. So this version is it suggests more of an indifference, I would say, than the New Revised Standard Version, which was up before. But, I think we can kind of go back a little bit more. But that's one thing to sort of keep in mind here. Reverend Shanstrong, was that you? Were you going to say something?
Thank you so much. And what is happening here, if we look at the 4th verse of Genesis 4, and I just looked at the actual notes here, Exodus 13:12 is noted. So if we turn to Exodus 13, we see that and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, in verse 2, sanctify unto me all the firstborn whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. And so we find Abel realizing that the Lord wants the firstborn of man and beast because it belongs to him. So Abel sacrifices the firstborn, and God is pleased because God has already indicated in his word through Moses to the people that sanctify unto me all the firstborn whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast. And then it says a colon, it is mine. And if we look to Hebrews 11:4, we find something very, very similar. So the Lord is the Lord, and he's saying, this is mine, it's not yours. And that comes to me. And Cain realized that, and he was saying, but he decided to do something different. And so the Lord was not pleased, and Cain understood the reason for that and was angry with the Lord, but then of course had to take it out on his brother. So 11:4, Hebrews, by faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it being dead, yet speaketh. And I just want to share that from the word so that we have some understanding of the intent. God could see the intent.
Well, now, Chris, could you take this down and we can look at all the beautiful faces that are up there, and I appreciate that, knowing that you're on hand to call scripture back up. Now, I think that as we're perhaps, building perhaps a sermon or a message about like offerings and sacrifice, I think it's, important to make the connections with other pieces, with other portions of scripture, right? But let's return our attention back to Genesis chapter 4 here, right? We don't know. And in fact, according to like our study guide, it's not clear that God asked for an offering, right? So that these folks, they did it on their own, right? And even when God is counseling, let's say, Abel, it's not, not Abel, excuse me, Cain, it's not about the sacrifice. It's how he's reacting to how his sacrifice, his offering has been received. Now, earlier on, there was, in our noontime session, Sister Marion Bennett brought up one of the tensions that is lifted up in this is the age-old tension between farmers and ranchers, right? We have Cain, who is a farmer, and we have Abel, who is a rancher, right? And, I'm from California, out west. I didn't grow up, on the farm or anything like that, a little closer to the ocean. But, you constantly have these water out in California. We have them going on now, right? Well, I need access to this, aquifer or this river or this lake, the farmer says, to fertilize, to water my crops, right? But then the rancher says, well, I need it to feed my cattle, my sheep. Well, I need to, the farmer says, I need to put up this fence here because these, longhorn steers keep trampling over my cabbage and I don't have anything that I can take to the market, right? So we have this tension, and we're also dealing with agrarian people, right? This would be a struggle that they would immediately understand, right? The tension between the farmer and the rancher, right? And then there's also just the basics of, sibling rivalry, right? Like, I have to be very careful when I heap praise on one kid in earshot of the other, because they're gonna be saying, "Well, Dad, I did well here." They're gonna look for something. We could be talking soccer, and one of my, my oldest son, who's really into it, talks about this great move that he did. Well, then, his little brother is like, well, yeah, but you should have seen the way I jumped off of the structure. It was amazing. I flew through the air like Superman, right? So there's these tensions there. But, in Dr. Sandstrong's point about, offering and whatnot, and there's also some commentary about, you could have given up of an apple or some grain or whatnot, but giving you don't know what a calf could go on to produce, right? Slaughtering that calf may mean that you're sacrificing future livestock. You may be sacrificing the ability to get milk and butter and sweet cream for, in perpetuity, right? So an argument could be made that by giving of livestock, you're sacrificing, more than just giving of fruits and vegetables and whatnot, even though there's a lot of labor that went into that. But again, God is not admonishing or counseling Cain on the sacrifice. It's on his reaction. Now, why might that be? Sister Young, I see you nodding and everything like that. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, he's counseling him on his behavior, his response to that, to what he perceived as being receiving the sacrifices less than his brothers, and his warning to him is that response can take you towards sin, which it actually ended up doing, because he was, instead of him talking to God about why he was upset or his feelings or how he didn't respond back to God, he took it out on his brother. And that was not the appropriate thing to do. So we should talk to God when we're mad with him and leave his creations alone.
All right. Um, now you brought up sin, right? Or was sin in the text? Well, yeah, it actually was in the text, right? It says sin is lurking at the door. Brother Chris, if you have a chance to bring that up. But it says, if you do well, you will not be accepted. And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. It's desire for you, but you must master it. Now, what is sin? Right? Let's think about this. And don't give me, before you answer that, and you just drop it in, in the chat, right? But before you answer it, let's remember, right? The 10 Commandments haven't been issued yet, right? We're dealing with the primordial history here before, before the 10 Commandments, before Levitic law, all of that stuff has been, has not happened yet. Right. So, and we're several thousand years past that. Right. But so within the context here, what might sin? I mean, I'm asking you to ignore everything that you already know and think about sin, but try to think about it within the context of here when God is saying sin. Right. Feel free to, drop it in the chat, or if somebody has, anyone have any thoughts on that one? So I will posit that sin means separation, right? To be out of communion and fellowship with God and the rest of creation. If we were first and foremost created to be in relationship with God, with ourselves, and with others, and all of creation, then sin, and I believe it's Paul Tillich, the theologian who sort of really began to kind of explore this notion that, and we have sin is disobeying God in his word. We have that in there, but also it is causing a separation from God. And one could, very easily make the argument that, disobeying God is causing a separation, right? We saw that in the Garden of Eden, that the, ignoring God's admonition about eating from the forbidden tree caused the separation. They were banished out from, the garden. And as we see here, in verse 8, we see the beginning of that. Chris, can you scroll up? Can I have somebody to read from verse 8 through the end where it says east of Eden?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let us go out to the field." And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield to you its strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you have driven me away from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets me may kill me." Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance." And the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who came upon him would kill him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden.
All right, thank you. Chris, can you take that down real quick? So I got a lot of questions. I don't know about you guys. But one question I want to know, and this is the second time in 4 chapters of the Bible that God does this. Why does God ask a question that he already knows the answer to? Anyone?
That's what parents do all the time. They want to see if you're gonna lie.
That's right, exactly. They want to know if you know.
What's the value in that?
Because you're more likely to redeem them if they've come to the point of knowledge that they've done something wrong. But if they're ready to stand in that lie and just take it as far as they can take it, you know you got some work to do.
All right. Anyone else? When was another time when God asked a question that we already knew God knew the answer to?
He asked
I think that was with Adam.
yeah, Adam and Eve.
When they asked Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you?
Right.
Why are you naked?
Yes.
Why are you hiding? What's that chocolate doing in the corner of your mouth? Right? What doesn't God do? So we know God, we know God asks a question, and that's some, legit, but what, or let me not say it. What are your thoughts in terms of the punishment that God metes out on Cain, and that there's some limits, right, that God imposes upon the punishment? I mean, I think we can all agree, even, that murder is, you can't really come back from that, right? At least not, you can't come back from that.
Well, the thing is, one thing that God does is that he doesn't punish Cain with what he actually did. So he murdered, but no one is able to murder him, which sometimes that is the punishment. You kill, you are killed, or you stand trial and you're killed. But in this case, we don't see that God makes sure that no one can murder can murder Cain.
Now, in the previous pericope, right, we hear God counseling Cain. Look, man, you got to get this thing in check. Otherwise, you're going to do something that's going to be real bad, right? It almost suggests that God knows what Cain is capable of and is inclined to do, but it doesn't stop it happening. All powerful, all knowing, omniscient God allows for the slaughter, the murder of a brother over jealousy. Sister Marie, Anne Marie.
Yeah, it sounds to me like this is where this business. I think that Cain and Abel. Well, no, which was the Cain was the original inheritor of the sins of the father. If that line of, I know it's later in the biblical text where they talk about, the sins of the sons are going to be passed on, or the sins of the father are going to be passed on to the sons. So I'm wondering if if this is the beginning of all of that, and this is the justification in this particular text, I don't personally believe in the literal interpretation of this. I believe that this is all symbolism and of some sort. I do not believe that this is a literal, and I don't believe in this as a literal happening, that there really was a Cain and an Abel and an Adam and an Eve. But I wonder if the lesson is that until the sin is addressed, it will continue. I don't know.
So you raise up a couple of points, and I'm glad that you did. And one of the things that we spent some time on, which I thought was very helpful to our understanding of the text, is that we're dealing with, right, multiple sources of the biblical text, right? We have the Yahwist or the J text, right, which presents an anthropomorphic God, a God who appears in human form and has human characteristics, right? God isn't having dialogue, right? He's talking with Cain, right? Relating to him, as we've heard this many times before, as a parent, right? I mean, we all know what we have done in the streets, and then we come home and our parents says, well, how was your day today? Right? And depending on how they ask that question, we know whether or not they know what really happened, or they're just asking the question, right? So the choice is ours. We have the free will to be like, oh, it was, whatever, or to come clean, right? Or and maybe we didn't do anything bad. Maybe we just experienced something and our parents now know about it because the teachers or whomever said, hey, you might want to have a talk with Gianni when he gets home, right? He was a little off, or whatever it is, right? So we have the sort of anthropomorphic God, and then we have the priestly text, right? Which again presents this sort of perfect, all-knowing, omniscient, all-powerful God without faults. Everything is sort of orderly. There are, if you have your books with you, if you look on page 8 of Holy Imagination, there's a chart that there's 4 primary texts within the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of, I'm holding up 5 books of the Bible. The 2 primary ones are the Yahwist, which I said, Yahwist is known for anthropomorphic depictions of God and tends to have a fairly low opinion of humanity. So usually when God appears in human form, something's wrong with humanity. They went off the rails somehow, some way. And usually that God lets us know. Right? And then you have the priestly texts associated with religious leaders, as it is concerned with ritual, observance of law, dietary laws, ancestry, and so on, right? And so I'm gonna so that's sort of 2 things to keep in mind, and I'm gonna pause on that real quick because there was the other point. I should have started with this, that a lot of these early primordial history, right, before we get to the patriarchs, which sort of starts with the story of Joseph and like the definitely the last half of Genesis, and then on into Exodus and whatnot, is etiological in nature. EIT logical. I'm a terrible speller, but etiological means meaning. They're searching for an understanding. Why is this world the way that it is? Why are we in these conditions? And this is particularly important because a lot of scholars know the sort of dominant thought in the biblical, the Hebrew Bible scholarship is that this primordial history was composed during the Babylonian exile, right? So and we're not talking about a Josephine Baker or a Richard Wright or a James Baldwin self-imposed exile. I got to get out of the United States and go over to Paris to find freedom. These people are living they're strangers in a strange land, trying to make sense of how did we once have this kingdom and our temple? We ain't got that no more. What happened, right? So it's not only, trying to make sense of the natural world, but how could we have fallen out of disfavor with our God that we would be in these? Well, that must mean because we somehow created sin, right? So all of this is working through sort of making sense of the world that they're both the natural world, and then also like, how did we get into this situation right here, right? So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind, and particularly when Sister Anne Marie sort of talked about not thinking of these as literal, right? One of the things that my Hebrew Bible professor, Dr. Alice Bellis at the Howard University School of Divinity, when she sort of teaches about the second creation story, right? She says, oh, this would have been considered a play, right? Some theater, right? Where they create the world, God creates the world, and then God creates man, and then God says, oh, man, you must be lonely. Let me find a companion for you. Here's a goldfish. Nah, that ain't working for me, God. All right, here's some horses. Nope. Ain't gonna do it for me either, God, right? So you would imagine a play, right? Where you have all of these, these people dressed up or acting like the different animals. They have the antlers and they're a deer, or they're moving slow like a hippopotamus, or somebody an elongated neck, right? No, that ain't working for me. And then you have this exasperated God, right? Human. Like I created this garden. You got you got everything that you possibly need. What more can you need, man? Oh, I get it, right? And then he puts Adam to sleep and creates Eve, right? So again, and when we think about this, and I think it's important when we're thinking through some of these and what does it mean, like when as humans we're limited in our in our ability to even imagine God, right? We're limited by time, space, our mental capacity, our experiences, right? And so that is an important sort of thing to keep in mind as we're thinking, so that there are folks who are thinking through meaning, but particularly the weaving of the different texts. So the sources. Chris, can you pull up Genesis chapter 4 again? So what we have here, right? Now I'm gonna go. So we have the first book, which is the priestly text, very orderly account, right? Omniscient God, who all-powerful God, who puts everything in order and whatnot. Then we have Genesis chapters 2 and 3, which are the Yahweh text, where we have the anthropomorphic God, the God who takes on human form and human characteristics and behaviors and whatnot. And then that continues on through the first half of Genesis chapter 4. And then, can you scroll up, Chris, please? And then you have the last portion of Genesis chapter 4. And I'm not going to read all of it, but you guys can do it. And it gets into the genealogy. Cain knew his wife and conceived and bore Enoch, and built a city and named it Enoch after his son Enoch. And then if you go, just slowly scroll down, if you don't mind, Chris. I appreciate you doing this, brother. Again, we see more genealogy, right? Much more early. The whole tone shifts. We don't have a God who's dialoguing with Cain anymore, right? We have basically what reads like a census record by and large, right? It's much more sort of orderly. So what you just see right here in Genesis chapter 4, it starts with with the Yahweh text, an anthropomorphic God. And then we move into the priestly text, sort of setting it up. So Chris, if you can take that down, please. Thank you. So why is all of this important, right? Well, one, it's important as we're wrestling with the text to sort of kind of understand, because if you have a sense, and you don't have to become, you've got the chart on page 8 that helps you to sort of understand, the intention behind, or what the thinking is behind the various sources, right, of the text. But without having to, your mind should be begin to sort of feel the shift, like, oh, okay, when God appears and God is talking in some form, like, all right, we're in the Yahweh, and so this is a little bit more of meaning type, kind of, they're wrestling with trying to understand what's going on in their worlds. And whereas the priestly text is just that, these are the priests, the religious leaders, sort of saying, hey, this is an orderly way, this is how we should be doing, right? Meaning versus, it's almost like the how and the the why and the how versus the what and the when, right? That's one way to think about it. Don't quote me, because I just made that connection, but I think it works. But it's also important because our next significant chapter, which we're not going to have a lot of time to go into, but hopefully I will tease it with this quick video, because when we get to the story of the flood and Noah, here, let me see if I can. So when we get to the story of the flood, you have the various texts right there next to each other. Hold on. And no, that's not. All right. So I'm trying. So there's a here we go. There's a I'm not actually not endorsing the movie, because the movie itself is sort of has an interesting kind of history and is kind of problematic in terms of some portrayals of African Americans, but it's called The Green Pastures. It came out in 1936, and it tells early story of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, but God is he's an anthropomorphic God. And so this section here sort of sets up, it's God telling Noah, look, the flood is coming. But keep in mind, right, as we, I'm just going to stop talking and let this play. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't know who I is, do you? Oh, the face is easy, but I don't recall the name. I should have known you, Lord. I should have seen the glory.
That's all right, Noah. You didn't know who I was.
I was just old preacher Noah, Lord. And I was your servant. I ain't very much, but that's all I got.
Now you sit down, Noah, and don't let me hear you shaming yourself. Case you's a good man. As far as I can see, you and your family is the only respectable people in the world.
They just all poor sinners, Lord.
Yeah, I know. And I'm a God of wrath and vengeance. That's why I'm going to destroy this world.
Anything you say, Lord.
Noah, I want you to build me a boat. And I want you to call it the Ark. And I want it to look like this. I want you to take 2 of every kind of animal and bird there is in the country. I want you to take seeds and sprouts and put them on that ark, in case there is going to be all that rain. There's going to be a deluge, Noah, and there's going to be a flood. The levees is going to bust and everything that's fastened down is going to come loose. But they ain't going to float long. In case I'm going to make a storm that'll sink everything from a hen coop to a barn. There ain't a ship on the sea that'll be able to fight that tempest. They all got to go. Everything. Everything in this pretty world I'd made. Except one thing, Noah. You and your family and the things I said is going to ride that storm in the ark. And here's the way it's to be.
Yes, sir. This seems to be complete. Now about the animals. You say you want everything?
2 of everything.
That would include giraffes and hippopotamuses.
2 of everything there is.
There was a circus in town. I guess I can find them. Of course, I can get all the rabbits and possums and wild turkeys easy. Just send the boys out. But I was just wondering.
About what?
About snakes. You think you might like snakes, too?
Of course I'll want snakes.
Oh, I can get snakes. Lots of them. Of course, some of them's a little dangerous. Maybe I better take a keg of liquor, too.
You can have a keg of liquor.
Yes, sir, there sure is lots of different kind of snakes, come to think of it. There's cottonmouths, water moccasins, rattlers. Why, there must be 100 different kind of snakes down the swamps. Maybe I better take 2 kegs of liquor.
I think the 1 keg is enough.
No, I better take 2 kegs. Besides, I can put 1 on each side of the boat and balance the ship with them, as well as having them for medicinal uses.
You can put 1 keg in the middle of the ship.
It's just as easy to take 2 kegs, Lord.
I think the 1 keg is enough.
Yes, I know, Lord, but you see, 40 days and 40 nights.
1 keg, Noah.
Yes, Lord, 1 keg.
So if you have an opportunity, it is it's called the Green Pastures. It's available on Apple. You might be able to get a good chunk of it, if not all of it, on YouTube for free. It has a very kind of interesting, history. But I think it's worth. We've been experimenting with some film, faith and film series, and so that might be something that is worthy for conversation at some point. And so if there's interest, we can do that. But I think that that's particularly since we are as we're going through this yes, it comes on TCM, and it is very much in the kind of Yahweh. I mean the J tradition. It's a very anthropomorphic God who you kind of go through. I thought this scene was kind of was interesting. The scene just before you see God returning to earth for the first time after basically the creation, and God's like, what happened, right? And you also see the foreshadowing of the where Noah is trying to bargain with God for an extra barrel of liquor, right? And it's sort of a foreshadowing to him getting drunk in the scene with in the I'm blanking, but you know what I'm talking about, the mark of it's late. yeah, so it's a very interesting sort of setup there. But it's important. One of the things that I think we should kind of think about here as we move into Genesis 7, 8, and 9 in particular, which is sort of captures the whole pre-flood, flood, after flood. There's the sources are right next to each other, right? Whereas previously you have a very clear chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1 is one distinct source, 2 and 3 are distinct sources, their own source. And then 4, you have the first half, one source, the second half. In the flood account, they're right next to each other, right? And they're often in ways contradictory, because as what we saw in that piece, and I think most of us, you say, how many of each animal were loaded onto the ark? Most people are going to say, hold up the fingers, 2 of each. But if you read the text closely, there's another point where God instructs Noah to bring 7 of each animal onto the ark. Most of us, how long did the flood last? 40 days and 40 nights. Didn't it rain, children? Not a speck of land inside. Didn't it rain? That's from Schoolhouse Rock. That's how I learned my multiplication tables by 2. But it also says in the same text that the flood lasted for 150 days. And then there are other sort of sources. And when it goes back and forth, again, I'll leave it up to Pastor Lamar to tackle that. Why have those 2 things there? But again, those are different sources at work to sort of tell this story. And again, it's important to think about or to keep in mind that a lot of this was composed during the Babylonian exile. And we know that those Babylonian and other Near Eastern myths were, abundant, so were around. And so they're making sense of all of that. Any last or final thoughts? All right. Well, we'll close out in prayer. I want to, first of all, before we do that, thank you all for, being here and engaging. And it was definitely an enriching experience and time for me. And I hope so for you as well. Let us look to the Lord. Heavenly Parent, we come to you at the close of this session, and we pray that the discussion and the material was stimulating to our minds and our spirits. Let us sit with and wrestle with what we heard. I pray that we all heard something new. And even if we didn't and we heard it many times before, we were able to think about it in different ways. We know, Lord, that whether we took the time to drop a name or a thought in the chat for someone, maybe ourselves, in need of prayer, we know that we all are in need of the comfort of the Holy Spirit. And we know that even though we, for one reason or another, may not have felt compelled to share a praise report, we know that there is one out there, and we want to say thank you for that. We also know, Heavenly Parent, that the essence of a powerful prayer means that we are willing to do for ourselves and others that which we ask of you. So as we quit this sacred retreat of friendship and fellowship, we pledge to co-labor with you on behalf and with the whole of creation. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we humbly pray this prayer. Amen.
Amen.